Good morning. This is Pat O'Connell. I'm calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's regular open meeting. It's Thursday, December 12th, 10 a.m. We're at the Volcom Building in Santa Fe and also broadcasting on YouTube. Mr. Cameron, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Ellison?
Present.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Present.
Mr. Chair, all commissioners are here and you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico as the symbol of the perfect friendship among united cultures. Commissioners, do you have any changes you'd like to make to the agenda we have for today?
Mr. Chair, I do have one motion to make. I would move that item number 18 on the consent agenda, which is 24-240 SPS Renewable Energy Portfolio Plan, be moved to the regular action items.
Okay, so I would propose we'll make that number 3 on utility matters. So I move that we proceed with the agenda that was posted with one modification. Case number 2400240 UT will be moved from the consent agenda to regular action.
A second.
Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Aguilera? Aye. Commissioner O'Connell?
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison?
Aye.
The motion to approve the agenda as modified passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to provide public comment? Again, it's a you snooze, you lose situation. The bake-off continues, so. Mr. Rodriguez, do we have anybody registered online to provide public comment?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anyone online for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Announcements. Do we have any announcements from Office of General Counsel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one quick announcement, which sort of dawned on me this morning, and I asked you a question about it earlier, which is one of our attorneys, Katie Lang, is going to be moving over to the legal division. I realized this morning that I had forgot to talk to the commissioners about that, but apparently you knew about it anyways. And I'm mostly saying this for the public, the regulated entities, that her caseload is being distributed amongst the other OGC attorneys. We'll be updating the certificates of service in the next week or two. And so we wish her well. Really glad that she is moving over to another division and not leaving the agency entirely. And of course, we'll miss her hard work and her teamwork. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. I also see that as great news that we'll have more help in the legal division, and that help is Katie. So thanks for that. Commissioner announcements. I have a recitation I need to read, so I'll do that now. On December 10th, 2024, the commission met in closed session pursuant to NMSA 1978 10-15-1H2, meetings for limited personnel matters, the discussion of hiring, promotion, demotion, dismissal, assignment, or resignation, or the investigation or consideration of complaints or charges against any individual public employee. So that's the law. What we were actually doing was interviewing candidates for a regional markets policy advisor position. So all those scary things that were potentially happening were not. And then I affirm for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited only to those specified in the posted notice and agenda for that meeting. specifically discussions regarding candidate interviews for regional markets policy advisor position. I further affirm that no final actions were taken in the closed meeting. And then, I like to look ahead, see if we have any hearings or other opportunities for public engagement between now and our next open meeting, and I didn't see anything scheduled. And partially that's due to the fact we're gonna meet next week. So the next open meeting for the commission will be December 19th. Any commissioner, did you also have any announcements you'd like to make?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Great. So we'll proceed. Next item on the agenda is approval of prior meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes you'd like to make to the draft minutes? Yeah, I didn't either. So I'll go ahead and move for approval of the prior meeting minutes.
I second.
Mr. Cameron,
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The motion to approve the minutes for the November 14th, 2024 regular open meeting passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next up is the consent action agenda. Just reminder that there are 17 cases on that. Now we've moved case number 18 to regular action. So is there any discussion or questions for general counsel on the potential orders in the consent action items?
I had just a comment or two, Mr. Chair, in the 10th item, which is 24,272, the gas company's request for variance on the gas cost factor statement. This is something I brought up previously. I have to wonder whether our rule in requiring that the company submit the statement 15 days prior to the start of the month, whether a purpose is being served by requiring the statement that far ahead of the beginning of the month. And I think that rule was established a long time ago, and I think everybody's kind of used to there's probably the gas company can press a button and print out the variance request, and we probably have the same with our attorneys here. But I think it could be worth just asking the question as to whether 2 weeks prior, 15 days prior to the beginning of the month is serving a purpose. And since it's a rulemaking matter, it's something that I or some member of the advisory staff could reach out to the gas company and just get some clarification on that point. It's not a big deal, obviously, but it's I just see it happening quite often, especially in the winter time. And I guess the other thing that surprised me a little bit was that in case number 12, that's 2198, the ComNet, that so they haven't started yet, and we're giving them their initial disbursement, yet they have to finish by May of next year. And usually these are 3 years are given for these projects, but I understand from Ms. Stephans that they have obtained all their permits, and that typically most of the time in that 3-year period is taken up through the permitting and planning process, and that actually installing the equipment is pretty quick. So I've been assured that is a reasonable timeframe.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions on consent items?
Nothing for me, Chairman.
Okay, so I will move for approval of the potential orders in the consent agenda items.
A second.
Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilar.
Aye.
The motion to approve the the consent agenda with the one change that we already approved before, passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, so first regular action item agenda is case number 24-00120 UT. That's SPS's Transportation Electrification Plan. We'll begin with a presentation of the potential final order from Mr. Lundin.
Morning, Commissioners. So I've prepared for you today a final order in the docket just described for SPS's 2025 to 2027 TEP or Transportation Electrification Plan. The final order I provided to you would approve and adopt the recommended decision of the hearing examiners in full. It would grant one exception of the joint interveners, that is CCAE and Prosperity Works, on a kind of minor clarifying issue, and it would reject all other exceptions. Since I first provided you the final order a few weeks ago, this week there have been some red line edits to it, and I would just want to mention those or highlight those so we're all on the same page here. These edits were shared this week, most recently yesterday, and uploaded to Board Effect this morning. So if your printout was from prior to this morning, then you might not have it. So first is paragraph 46, which is the last paragraph of the discussion section of the final order. This paragraph clarifies that in adopting the RD and the requirement for public facing charging stations to have credit card readers, that the commission is additionally requiring these charging stations to satisfy the NEVI standards for payment methods. And the NEVI standards are quoted in the paragraph. There's 4 points, which you can read, or I can read aloud if you want me to. Additionally, this is supported in the evidence of the case. CCA witness Madsen advocated for these NEVI standards to be imposed. So moving on, there's 2 new decretal paragraphs added to the order. Each of these decretal paragraphs represents kind of sort of like data requests, but requirements for SPS to include in its next step filing. That is, a report on the actions that SPS takes to, coordinate with NMDOT, NMDOT's infrastructure deployment plan, and available NEVI funding during the course of this TEP and as well as in preparation for their next step. And additionally, SPS shall provide a report on kind of a monthly, not a monthly report, sorry, a report on monthly data for uptime hours from the beginning of this TEP to the filing date of its next TEP, uptime hours for public charging stations. So with those three, those are the 3 main edits I want to highlight. The final order would otherwise approve and adopt the RD. As I said, it would approve SPS's plan as amended by the RD in the final order. And it would require SPS to file a new advice notice within a few days by December 18th, I believe, because the approvals granted herein would affect the advice notice that they originally filed. So with that, I will stand for question.
Thank you, Mr. Lundin. And then I'm the one responsible for those last minute edits. So I'll take the obligation to explain why I did that. And then we can turn it over for questions and discussion. So the 3 that you highlighted was just clarifying that in denying the exception, that exception was worded about credit card readers. Go back to the testimony in the case. That's really the NEVI standard. So just wanted to me, I don't see that as a change. to the final order, just clarification for what's in there. And then I added the two things about coordination with DOT and reporting on charger uptime. And all three of those, I landed on those after reading the discussion in the case, and a point that's frequently made is that SPS's service territory is characteristically rural. And so when I was thinking about how's a transportation electrification plan the same or different if we accept that the southeast New Mexico is a pretty rural service territory, I thought, and then I went and looked at NMDOT's report for NEVI implementation. And what NEVI is a federal program, lots of federal tax dollars available nationwide to build out a national charging station for EVs. And then you look at the report, and SPS's southeast New Mexico service territory, especially south of I-40, is kind of a, we'll get to that in the next phase type area. So don't expect a whole lot to happen from DOT with the federal NEVI funds in terms of charging stations. So, and then also rural character means SPS is intertwined service territory with a lot of co-ops that are out there. So for me, that really emphasizes the need for coordination in order to build out a charging network that works for the citizens of the state of New Mexico. Making sure we get chargers in places that fill in critical gaps is important. That requirement, you know, if you read the rule, it's arguably in the rule. The reason I chose to try to emphasize it in the final order is I didn't see a whole lot of convincing evidence that the coordination had happened in a real way. You know, we talked to them, we read their reports, but let's sit down and actually figure out who's doing what and why is the kind of thing that I was hoping to see in there, and I didn't. And then if you think about charging stations out in rural locations, it's not just that the station exists, it also needs to work when people are there and want to use it. And so it could be, you know, I know in this plan, SPS is moving away from owning these stations in their thing, but it could be if it's a station out in a place that isn't very well populated, there's not going to be a commercial argument to build a station. So that's opportunity for Southwest Public Service to provide public service by building a charging station. And if no commercial entity wants to do that, then maybe there is a public interest argument in them owning that station. So that led me to asking these questions about uptime. So it's not just the station exists, it's got to work when you need it. We regulate SPS, we don't regulate the private charging station owners. So just curious to know who does a better job of making sure these stations work all the time. So then again, if you're out in the rural area and you're relying on a charging network, when you pull up to the charger, not only do you need it to work, it's beneficial if your experience with using that charging station is consistent. You know, is it what you expect when you get there? So that leads to NEVI standards. You know, there will be stations built around New Mexico where payment for a NEVI funded charging station has to meet a standard for payment options. So those are chargers paid for by our tax dollars. Just felt to me like, let's be consistent there and say chargers paid for by our utility customer dollars also should meet a standard that produces a consistent experience for the folks who are using those stations. And then again, I see that just saying we're talking about the NEVI standard as just a clarification for what's in the final order. When I dug through testimony in the case, the debate centered around, should we let people use credit cards, yes or no? But the root of that debate was CCAE's testimony. It says meet the NEVI standard. So final order just says contactless charger, you can use a contactless credit card, and that's what the NEVI standard is. So I think just in general, it's better if we approve a standard than specify a technology element of a standard. Because the other thing that's happening is a lot of evolution, and I think by requiring, making it clear we're requiring a standard, we're future proofing our decision. Because then as the standard evolves in response to technology, our instructions don't have to evolve. It's just keep meeting that standard. So if NEVI standard moves away from needing credit cards, okay. Right now it requires credit cards. So again, rural stations must be useful when people need them. People should have a consistent experience when they try to use them. That's the thread that pulled together all of those things I added to your draft order. And then, as always, thank you for your work putting the draft together, and also shout out to hearing examiners Hearst and Crime Camp. And these transportation electrification cases are happening in a very dynamic environment, so that can make it challenging. So again, appreciate their efforts too. But so anyway, that's my explanation for why the draft order we have in front of us has those edits in it. And then I'll just turn it over to Commissioners Aguilera and Ellison if you got any more questions, debate.
Well, thank you for those comments, Chairman. And just on that topic, I think you said this and our council did as well, but just in case not, I wanted to clarify that my understanding is that this explanation that you just provided is for the public facing chargers and not private ones that could also benefit from some of the package here that's being approved.
That's correct. So
Yeah, and that's an important point too. I agree that fleet charging stations, please do what you need to do to make those cost effective and work.
Thank you for that, and I agree with you and the RD on this point. I think it would be counterintuitive if customers came up to one of these chargers and then could not use it. I think these changes are appropriate so that we get the most benefit out of the infrastructure that customers are ultimately paying for here.
Well, I'd like to say I think those additions are very constructive additions to the final order. I do agree that additional public charging stations should adhere to this standard. I did want to ask Mr. Lundin, under this new plan, how many additional public charging stations are being proposed?
I think 0.
0.
I
Okay.
think that's SPS doesn't want to, I guess, be in the ownership of the charging stations, but help, expand transportation electrification by offering the rebates and the programs to allow third parties to build them out.
Right. I noticed from their previous transportation electrification plan, they said that they would have 4 sites with a total of 8 ports. I guess that's 8 places to charge a car, and the high voltage DC 3 sites with 6 ports. And it is interesting that the other 2 investor-owned utilities didn't take this approach, that SPS is unique in the ownership of those public charging stations, which is an element I think is attractive. I think, you know, as the, well, I think one could certainly make thinking about the transportation, uh, electrification program act that, you know, more public charging certainly seems to comport with the intent, of that act. And I guess one other thing I wanted to comment on is that there was a lot of discussion around how the cost recovery for the rebates for home chargers and for the wiring associated with the chargers. You know, I think this happens over and over again in, you know, not only for the SPS cases, but it seems to be happening with the other two investor-owned utilities as well, that a lot of time and effort is spent on, you know, rehashing this point. How long should the cost recovery be? Should it be at the weighted cost of capital? Should it be at, you know, some, you know, rate of deposit, or, you know, what exactly should it be? And, you know, I tend to think that if we think about revising the rule at some point, that, you know, it would make sense to sort of figure out, what do we think is the right approach to this? Put it in the rule and just stop debating about it in each of these cases, because we should be able to come up with an approach that we think is fair across the board. But you know, generally I'm in favor of this order.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Allison. So, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think we want to provide clear guidance on the recovery. And so far, it seems like we have different approaches that are being proposed or that are actually being approved. I would say that the approach that is being approved or is I guess up for potential approval is different than what we have approved in the past. I do think that it matters how big the investment is, as you know, we want to avoid I guess unreasonable amount of impact, and might want to spread it out across a certain amount of years. And so I think that's one thing that we would want to consider, is how big the investment is. I think in this case, the RD is suggesting that this is a manageable amount such that it does not need to be spread over 10 years. But I could also see a situation where there is a larger investment where it would have too much of an impact on ratepayers if we did not spread it out. So I think one of the things that was not discussed enough, or maybe even at all, is what we've approved outside of the SPS footprint. So we have transportation electrification plans that have been approved for El Paso Electric and PNM as well. And I think that precedent could have also informed this, you know, what is being recommended in the RD and this case overall, because there are, I think the approach that the RD recommends that came from the DOJ's testimony and recommendation is reasonable. However, I also think that it's different and doesn't the story doesn't fully come together. So one of the things that's saying is SPS is not going to own and operate this equipment, and therefore this should be treated as an expense. In the examples of El Paso Electric and PNM, these rebates are going into a regulatory asset. And so I don't think that story really fits together because we're not treating it as an expense in other contexts. And so the fact that we approved in El Paso Electric and PNM these rebates being into a regulatory asset, I think shows that that argument that SPS is not going to own and operate the equipment is not dispositive here. And there's also this question as to whether they should earn a return on the investment. And I think that the proposal and also the recommendation could both land in a reasonable, in a zone of reasonableness. The CCAE and Prosperity Works, I think, made good points. I think it was both of them or one or the other that there is equipment being installed here, that the equipment creates revenue and that it will be in service for a certain amount of time. SPS says that it will be in service for 10 years, and I think that's likely regardless of whether they own and operate the equipment. And so I think what I'm saying is there is a good reason to treat these incentives on a case-by-case basis, as I think there are some gray areas here, and different approaches can align or fit within what the transportation and electrification statute is asking us to do. The order that is before us today approves the RD, which is recommending the approach to expense the rebates in each of the 3 years. I think that's reasonable. I also could have been convinced to do it a different way. And the circumstances are going to matter. I don't necessarily have a different approach to recommend, given that I do think the order is giving us a reasonable approach to vote on. But I think that there is more to think about here. And I wish that we would have looked at the EP and PNM examples, which I also understand is not the same construct overall. SPS here is forecasting, and in El Paso Electric and PNM, they're both including the rebates into a regulatory asset and earning the it's not the cost of debt, but it's the yes, the customer deposit, right? So that's my explanation here, and I might include a separate statement on this order to that effect. I also wanted to talk about the distribution upgrades, but before I move on, I wanted to see if there's any comments or responses to my speech.
I would just say your speech traveled the same ground that I did when I was looking over that issue, and then agree that I landed in a spot that the RD was reasonable for this case at this time. Not that it was the only answer possible.
I agree with that.
So as to there's about $9 million worth of distribution upgrades that was proposed in this plan, and some of those are referred to as proactive investments. The RD ultimately found or recommended that those investments are speculative. I don't know that I would go that far. I think that there are situations where distribution upgrades could fit in the transportation electrification plan, and perhaps maybe with more detail than what was provided, or more specific upgrades. But I thought that the proposal by SPS here was not unreasonable. You know, some of the arguments against the distribution upgrades are there's a different vehicle for that, and they might provide other benefits. I don't think there's any one distribution upgrade that only provides one type of benefit. And so I don't think that we could make a decision just based on that. In the future, if there is an upgrade that perhaps might be more specific, I certainly would be willing to consider that, you know, if it's related to transportation electrification and prudent, I think that the commission might be able to approve that. And so I do not want to close the door on that potential. And so I intend to include in my separate statement something to that effect as well.
Yeah, I'll just, again, give you the yes, I agree with that, what you said there, and then on that one is where my mind wandered when I was working through those issues, was just another argument for the value of distribution planning. Because if there was a distribution plan that showed here's the feeders that are good, here's the feeders that need work, here are feeders that customers will benefit if there's upgrades to enhance transportation electrification, then that kind of context would have made the proposal in this case much more approvable. And then I don't know what it is about transportation electrification plans. Maybe it's just because we haven't seen many of them. Maybe the rule could be improved, but they seem to be susceptible to things that look like honeypots. You know, we had the distribution planning, give me a bunch of money and I'll figure it out where to put it. P&M case, we had the huge marketing budget without any explanation of how that money was going to get spent. So anyway, it could just be we'll work that out just through a series of lots of cases, but it also reinforced why I think distribution planning, another value for distribution planning.
And one thing that I find interesting here is that we have this transportation electrification statute that applies to the 3 different IOUs, and we also have a public interest standard, which is requiring us to consider the interests of the customers. There is some element here where the customer base for SPS is not the same as it might be for the other 2 utilities. I think one of the things that was mentioned was the geography and it being a rural area. I think the other thing that came out of this plan is that in the prior plan, there seems to have not been a whole lot of interest, at least not as much as what was anticipated. And that makes me wonder whether in thinking about the public interest, whether the customers here want to pay for more transportation electrification or not. And so that's just something that I'm thinking about also as I'm trying to apply the law and the public interest requirement here. Oh, thank you.
On that distribution investment topic, you know, I also think that what was in here felt a little more speculative, that they would be converting, you know, making some investments in lines where they thought that there might potentially be in the future a public charging station. If instead SPS had committed to putting in a public charging station in a location and needed a distribution upgrade to enable that, you know, that's obviously a different question, and I think, you know, would be much easier to agree to that.
Great. As always, I appreciate the discussion we have, and hopefully we're helping people understand what we're thinking and will improve the process. I'll go ahead and move for approval of the final order Mr. Lundin's put in front of us in this case, and then opportunity for more debate and questions, obviously, if motion gets seconded.
A second.
Okay, so any other questions, comments before we vote on this? Seeing none, Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The motion to pass the order as presented passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Lundin next up on the agenda is case number 24-00222 UT. It's a New Mexico Gas Company's application for continued use of its PGAC. And we have Alyssa Herrera Waldrop here with us, and I think this is the first time she's presenting a case, so please be mean to her. Okay, rookie, you need to push the button to turn green.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. Well, good morning, commissioners. It's great to see you all. This matter concerns the New Mexico Gas Company's application for its continued use of its purchase gas adjustment clause. The New Mexico Gas Company filed its application earlier this year. No party intervened, and staff filed testimony supporting the application. The hearing was then vacated. The hearing examiner issued a recommended decision, which recommended that the commission approve New Mexico Gas Company's application, and no party filed exceptions. What is before the commission today is a proposed order that adopts the recommended decision in full. Unless there are any questions so far from the commission, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide a brief explanation of the statutory and rule-based requirements, and the final order itself. A purchase gas cost adjustment clause levels the cost of gas in a customer's bill to reflect the actual cost of the gas to a utility. Gas utilities periodically file for continued use of these clauses. Under the Public Utility Act, the commission considers the following factors when assessing these applications. There are 4. First is whether the adjustment clause is consistent with the purpose of the Public Utility Act, primarily including whether it provides just and reasonable rates. 2, the specific adjustment mechanism to recover tax, gas, fuel, or purchase powered costs. 3, whether the adjustment clause shows the cost that should be included in the adjustment clause, the procedures to avoid the inclusion of the costs in the adjustment clause that should not be included, and methods by which the propriety of costs that are included, which may be determined by the commission in a timely manner, including what informational filings are required to enable the commission to make this determination. And 4 is whether the adjustment clause is for the proper adjustment period. Here, New Mexico Gas Company's application satisfies these statutory requirements and related commission rules. The proposed final order would approve the application on that basis. Therefore, I recommend that the commission adopt the proposed final order, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Commissioners, you got any questions for Ms. Ferrera-Waldrop?
I do not have any questions, but also want to thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Good work on this order as well.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Could you briefly describe the formula for the adjustment clause?
To clarify, Commissioner Ellison, are you asking with the specific adjustment mechanism? One of
Yes.
those statutory requirements I reviewed? Yes, so primarily the statutory requirements are supported by the staff testimony. So this primarily came from the New Mexico Gas Company's staff testimony by let's see, witness Eric Buchanan. So I think it might make sense to kind of go through sections 2 through 4 because they seem to be sort of combined there. So the second, the specific adjustment mechanism to recover tax, gas, fuel, or purchase power costs. The adjustment clause provides a pricing mechanism that balances interests of the sales service to customers, regulators, and interests of the gas utility. This is more fully described in the testimony, but under 3 and 4, what the New Mexico Gas Company's has stated is that there's an external accounting firm that performs these independent procedures to validate these recorded transactions, including gas purchase expenses and billed gas recoveries associated with the adjustment clause. I realize now that I'm answering this might not be answering your question, but just to kind of go through this, I think it's important. New Mexico Gas Company also prepares an annual reconciliation of expenses to revenues. The agreed upon procedure is agreed to by the staff, NMPRC staff, the New Mexico Gas Company, and the external accounting firm, and also provides communications as a method to help the commission determine in a timely manner that the adjustment clause costs and revenues are appropriate. However, I don't know at this time. I don't think I can provide the actual formula. However, I would be happy to go back and look through that testimony just so I can be really clear with that answer.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, it's adjusting from month to month.
Right. So part of the analysis for section 1, which was whether it was consistent with the purpose of the Public Utility Act, and whether it was providing reasonable, proper service at fair, just, and reasonable rates. Witness Tom Bullard did explain that natural gas is a commodity that is in which short-term and long-term influences can cause the natural gas prices to change constantly, as you just stated. And the change in price is considered price volatility. That volatility creates uncertainty in the market and affects the New Mexico Gas Company because the purchase prices can be significantly higher. And that is affected by shifts in supply and demand, temporary influences, long-term influences, economic pressures, and unpredictable events. And so what the application explains is that the New Mexico Gas Company ensures that it can take actions to provide reliable gas to customers without requiring it to take on the risk of the volatile commodities market. And it does that by maintaining a broad portfolio of gas suppliers to ensure that the sales customers pay a market base price for natural gas and are able to benefit when gas costs decrease. The adjustment clause also allows the New Mexico Gas Company to pursue measures like hedging, which helps limit exposure to price increases while also allowing customers to have the benefit of the decrease in price. It uses a blended contract approach to create a diversified portfolio among suppliers and supply basins. And then the gas is contracted through procurement to ensure reliable suppliers are bought at the lowest reasonable prices to the consumer. It also sometimes meets its supply needs from gas from storage. And then they also have a gas price hedging program for protection should larger price spikes come during high usage periods in the winter. So all of that is part of the mechanism as well to address the change in the gas price.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no other questions or discussion, I will move for approval of the final order Ms. Herrera Waldrop has put for us today.
I second.
Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilar.
Aye.
The motion to approve the final order in 24-00222 UT passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, and thank you. Next up is our case number 24-00240, which is SPS's 2025 Renewable Energy Procurement Plan. We moved that off consent to regular and presentation from Mr. Gaggo. Floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, commissioners. This case 24-00240-UT is Southwestern Public Service Company's renewable portfolio standard application for the 2025 plan year and 2026 next plan year. It also includes the required 2023 RPS report. Significantly in 2025, the RPS standard has been increased to 40%. And a couple things of note with respect to these filings is that they do have to meet 15 requirements that are listed in Rule 17.9572.14. Staff and Southwestern Public Service Company agreed to vacate the hearing along with the hearing examiner in this case, based on a determination on their part that those requirements had been met. No additional resources were proposed in this filing by SPS. There is a reliance on bank directs to meet the 40% requirement in the 2025 plan year. And there is also testimony in the case regarding the voluntary renewable programs that SPS operates, a slight adjustment in the Solar Connect program due to the fact that the solar PPA is now more cost effective than the avoided cost of energy. That was seen as being adequately handled by the parties in the case. As I stated, the hearing was vacated and the determination was made by the hearing examiner to approve. My recommendation is that the commission approve the 2025 plan, and I stand for questions with respect to it.
Thank you for that presentation. Commissioner Ellison?
Yes, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Gitko. What impact does the load growth that SPS is experiencing have on their ability to meet the RPS mandates?
So currently, based on my review of the testimony in the case and the application, with the increase to 40%, SPS's current resources in and of themselves would not meet the 40% RPS standard, and therefore the statutorily accepted use of bank directs is currently used. Now, SPS is experiencing significant load growth and significant demand for load growth that, according to the application and testimony, is hindered to some degree until increased transmission comes on in 2027. Once that increased transmission capacity is made available, there is a large demand amongst SPS's customers to increase the load on the system, so that, for example, in Gable's testimony, he provides a chart that shows the RPS requirements in 2025 are 5,034 gigawatt hours. In 2027, that goes up to 7,945 gigawatt hours. And in 2028, the projected in their planning forecast amount is 9,307 gigawatt hours. So you see the RPS requirement go there from 5,034 gigawatt hours in 2025, all the way up to 9,307 in 2028. So with respect to what is the effect of the increased load, I think those numbers paint a pretty good picture.
Thank you. I did want to briefly share that table that you referenced. That's something I've been thinking about as well. I don't know how visible that is on the screen here, but what it's showing is that in 2026 and 2027, SPS is projecting that they'll only make a 26% RPS standard if you just look at what's generated in that year. In 2026 and in 2027, a 24% RPS by generation in that year. So what that means is that they are heavily relying on their banked renewable energy credits, RECs, to meet the 40% standard. It's interesting because I remember not so long ago, SPS was talking about having excess RECs and wondering what they would do with them. And now it appears they need them greatly. And this really does appear to be a result of load growth that, really, they're having to run just to stay in place because of the rapid growth that they're experiencing. And, this is something I wanted to highlight because I previously was feeling pretty comfortable with where SPS was and perhaps where the other utilities were. And, I'm not feeling so comfortable anymore after looking at this and really, internalizing what the load growth means for their RPS standard compliance. And, we do see that starting in 20, and I understand, Mr. Gidko, this chart, it appears to be considering currently existing and commission approved resources, but not including any future resources. Is that correct?
That's correct. It includes resources that are in place now and resources that have been approved and under construction, is my understanding. For example, the Cunningham plant that was approved.
Right.
There is an RFP in action right now. I know the commission was active with respect to that RFP's issuance, and my understanding is that there is an RFP that the bids are due in early January, and I believe in May the assessment of those bids is due, with the attempt to bring on additional resources to meet what would be RPS deficiencies in 2028. But the chart does not include anything that's not certain at this time.
Right, right. And, I did want to also make clear that in their integrated resource planning process, SPS was required to look at the next 3 years, which would be 24 through 26, and they stated there's not a problem in meeting the RPS standard, which is true because they had bank recs to rely on. However, when they did their modeling, they did not put a constraint in on attaining RPS standard. They simply let the model run and they observed where it came out in 2030 and in 2035. And I think it does bring up the important question that we've seen with El Paso Electric. When we approve a resource, does it become a system resource or does it become a New Mexico specific resource? And I think, we've seen the trend with EPE that the, initial renewable resources were applied for and approved as system resources, but then later resources were applied for and approved as New Mexico specific because the utility saw that it was really behind the curve. And as I look at SPS's situation, I can't help but think that they've got to be thinking of something similar, that maybe as they consider bringing new resources on, new renewable resources on, whether those ought to be New Mexico jurisdictional specific, given the large RPS shortfall that we're seeing. I mean, it's looking like they'll need another 4 Hales or another 4 Sagamores, just to meet what they've got, the shortfall in 2028. And I would assume that, those might need to be New Mexico specific resources so that all the recs go to New Mexico. So, I guess this, to me, this really highlights sort of what the rapid growth that SPS in particular is experiencing is doing to its ability to meet the RPS standard, and and just thinking about what can we do to help, what kind of guidance can we provide in terms of meeting the standard. I guess that was mainly what I want to say about it.
Any other question or discussion on this item?
Just want to highlight something that I think about, which is not very apparent, but obviously there's the RPS standard, which is a law that is applying here. When we think about that, beyond that, just emissions overall, a lot of the growth that is being experienced is to offset emissions that we would never count. Like diesel generators running to extract fossil fuels from the ground being replaced by cleaner energy. And so just, thinking about this picture beyond just what the RPS is saying, I think if we think about the idea that is behind the RPS, it's about having cleaner resources and reducing emissions, even though it shows up in this kind of weird rec mechanism. Yeah, and there's no real way to quantify that, but I think that's interesting. That's not what we're considering here under the law, but I think important to recognize.
Thank you for that. I don't have any questions or comments, so looks like we're ready for, I'll move to adopt the final order that Mr. Getko's provided here today.
I'll second.
Any questions, comments before we vote? Seeing none, Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
The motion to approve the order presented in 24-00240-UT passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Next up on the agenda is discussion and potential action item. The commission issued a inquiry regarding grid readiness and how that relates to economic development. We received several responses, so thank you. We'll have a presentation from Mr. Alejandro Redigui Martinez and discuss what to do next and see if there is an action item for today or a future meeting. So take it away, Alejandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, commissioners. Just let me know if you're having any trouble hearing me or if I'm coming through okay. As the chair just mentioned, this docket concerns the rapidly expanding demand for electric service in New Mexico. In October, the commission opened this inquiry docket to assess whether new or existing high demand customers are having difficulty getting the service they need from electric utilities. And if that is the case, what the commission can do about it. The order opening the docket solicited bench requests from PNM, EP, and SPS. It then asked for comments on those same bench requests and responses from staff and any interested party. Last week, we received the last batch of those responses, and I'm here today. So to structure the conversation about those responses and what we're going to do going forward, I'm going to summarize who provided those responses, how those responses characterize the scope of the issue, the specific challenges identified by the responses, potential mitigation strategies for the commission to consider. And because many of the responses also requested that the commission engage in a series of workshops, I was going to provide a couple workshop topics for the commission to consider. Okay, so the commission, as the chair mentioned, received significant responses to this inquiry. There's clearly a lot of interest in this topic. In addition to the ordered responses from PNM, EP, SPS, and staff, the commission received responses from Interwest Energy Alliance, NMPRC, the New Mexico Large Customer Group, Walmart, Targa, ConocoPhillips, the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, and New Mexico Gas Company. Taken together, the commission received hundreds of pages of responses to these bench requests. In terms of the scope of the issue, there were several themes that cut across the responses. The first is that demand for electric service is significant and accelerating. The second is that our IOUs are at times struggling to meet this demand. And finally, the exact contours of the issues are differing across service territory. So for instance, SPS faces significantly more requests for new service than PNM or EP, but these service requests tend to be smaller in size. Another difference is that the energizing timelines are differing significantly across the IOUs as well. In terms of causes, the causes cited by the respondents were broad, varied. They included supply chain constraints, labor market constraints, issues related to land acquisition, environmental mitigation, and federal and state and local permitting. the need to obtain commission approval for certain projects and the application of certain substantive and procedural rules, limitations associated with load forecasting, and utility risk aversion. In other words, a utility's unwillingness to invest in infrastructure to serve this potential demand without guaranteed recovery. To expand on just one of those examples, supply chain constraints, utilities are reporting lead times for distribution transformers of 130 to 150 weeks, and lead times for certain transmission level auto transformers that can extend beyond 5 years. So these issues are very significant. In terms of potential mechanisms, again, they were varied. I'm only providing a summary, some examples of those mechanisms. Providing clarity towards certain substantive laws, potential changes to commission rules and practices to streamline proceedings, increased funding and staffing for the commission itself, increased collaboration with SPP to identify and resolve potential choke points, and customer-based solutions when a utility cannot meet demand. So those were generally directed towards the commission. There were other suggestions that were directed to the utilities themselves, including filing less complex resource procurements. For instance, in CCN applications, you can request the resources themselves and rate treatment. If you're requesting rate treatment, that creates a more complex proceeding. Providing greater transparency into the precise reasons for interconnection delay, and engaging in more robust pre-filing stakeholder engagement. Again, these were just some of the examples amongst very diverse filings. In terms of potential workshops, I think there's enough from just these filings to hold quite a number of them. I'm not going to provide you an exhaustive list, but I have a few topic suggestions that are drawn from the issues raised by the filings. The first would be a workshop regarding utilities' ability to pre-purchase and store long lead time standard equipment. Based on the responses we received, equipment lead times appear to cause the most significant delays. Just to put a fine point on it, it's not going to make very much of a difference whether the commission approves a CCN application in 8 months or 9 months, if it's taking a number of years for utilities to get the equipment that they need to implement those projects. Another option would be a workshop regarding the scope of the necessary in the ordinary course of business exception to the CCN statute. Clarity here will help parties avoid the time and expense of a CCN proceeding where it's unnecessary. Finally, another workshop could consider issues related to SPP membership, including the AQ study process. These issues appear to be causing significant delays, and I understand that the chair is going to begin a 1-year term as president of SPP's regional state committee next month. So that could be a topic that makes sense to get going on. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, just a few examples. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I agree. Yeah, you did. I thought I read the responses. I thought you did a really good job of characterizing and hitting the high points. Anybody who's interested, encourage you to go look at the docket. There's a lot there. One thing that came through and you highlighted in your presentation is the WEC utilities and the SPP utilities are facing a different challenge. So one of the things that I agree, it feels like workshop or workshops are in order. I also think having a series that's just devoted to SPS is worth it because they're in a different situation. One thing I thought was interesting and would be part of the thing I would explore in a workshop is the folks that were commenting on the SPP situation generally are members or represented by members of SPP. And then through working at the regional state committee, we hear about the AQ process quite a bit. So just one thing that occurred to me right away is it'd be valuable to bring that discussion to New Mexico. So maybe have a workshop that includes SPP and its customers, including SPS and the large customer group. So let SPP come and explain the situation to this forum. Because like I say, it's a topic that comes up almost every meeting over at SPP. So anyway, I agree with you. We probably should do workshops. I also would suggest let's create separate lane for SPS just because they're in SPP, not to pick on SPS. Commissioners, did you have any other questions or suggestions on what we should do next?
Well, I would just say that in looking at the record here, I definitely think that workshops are in order. There obviously are factors that we could do something about, others that we have less power to do anything with. But I hope that what comes out of this is more efficiency on our part. I think there are things that we could do with respect to efficiency and providing certainty. Chairman, thank you for bringing this topic before us. I think this is incredibly important for our state, and I know that there are efficiencies to be gained, and one thing I don't want is obviously we have to do our due diligence on behalf of the customers, but I don't want this agency to be the reason why economic development is not progressing, and there are a lot of realities. I think also in reality we'll get blamed for things that we have no control over, but that's just the nature of how it works, so nothing to complain about. But I think there's a lot of good that can come out of this, so looking forward to figuring out what these workshop topics could be. I was at the Northwestern Electricity Dialogue last week, and there was a panelist from Google, for example, explaining what different states are doing, and I think stakeholders like that could also come and help us and explain which models are working where, recognizing that there are differences. You highlighted some, Chairman, for the SPS that is in SPP. So there's a lot to think about here, and looking forward to really getting started on this.
Thank you. I hadn't thought about bringing in a customer with a national perspective, but I think that's a good suggestion. Commissioner Ellison?
Yes, I thought that this line of inquiry and the responses were very helpful. This is not information that we would normally get, and I think it's quite valuable. I agree there seemed to be concern about, can the PRC streamline the resource approval process? And I think we should think about that, how to streamline it while maintaining effective oversight. And the point was brought up, should we have sort of a bright line test for CCN applications? I mean, obviously it's clear when it's generation or transmission, but as we saw with the particular Hidden Mountain, I think it was transmission level substation, costing $100 million. There was a lack of clarity on should the utility have filed for that, and I think they are concerned whether it's 8 or 9 months or 2 months on, say, a CCN, because the argument was made here that if it's a CCN project, that they cannot even order equipment until that decision is made. I liked, I guess, the division most of the utilities made between the distribution level and the transmission level requests. That is very helpful. And, I guess with some of them, it struck me that, say, especially with the P&M, I just wonder how many of those requests were speculative. You get a lot of, extremely large requests that, seem like they were more, through, economic development, and just wondering, how long would it take and that sort of thing, versus some of the other utilities. I think it was more, a lot more pragmatic. We need to connect. We have the site, we need to connect. How long is it going to take? So, we did get, a range of data in what we're doing, but in the responses. But overall, I certainly concur that having a workshop or multiple workshops would be a good thing.
And commissioners, just thinking about where we're going from here, one option would be for me to, speak with each of you individually to think about the kind of topics that you're most interested in doing, and then I can start working with your staff to coordinate those workshops.
Yeah, I really appreciate that suggestion, and I also see the value in it, because listening to the three of us, we each had different points of emphasis, and I wish I thought of that. Was what I was thinking when I heard it. So anyway, from my perspective, yeah, please do that. Any objection to that instruction? Any other questions or comments for the information we have on hand?
Just one additional comment to kind of, tie what staff at this agency does to serve the public. As we talk about efficiencies and reducing or lowering the regulatory barriers, I think it also means that this agency has to do more. And just want to recognize the other parts of the agency that don't come before us as much, like Administrative Services Division, and how much they do to make sure that our budget is where it needs to be, so that we could actually do the things that we're doing. And we have DOJ here as well today, and it's also important for them, right, as a state entity, that they need the resources to be able to participate. And so it's not always super clear how your role as a state employee is helping to meet the public interest, but it does happen. And so just want to take a moment to appreciate that as well.
Good point, Commissioner.
And one thing I'll add to Commissioner Aguilera's points about, participation generally. We certainly would not want to limit these workshops to only the people who have filed bench or responses to these bench requests already, because these topics, they're going to affect many areas of the work that we do, and hearing from other regular participants in our proceedings is only going to make the work we do more effective.
Also a good point. Thank you. Okay, just to summarize where we're at is Mr. Reddy Martinez will be working to try to flesh out and design workshops. I know our next meeting is next week, and then after that'll be in January 9th. Don't know if we'll be able to communicate schedule for workshops next week, but if we can, we will. If not, then we'll find a way to communicate as soon as possible, because that's the other thing. If we're trying to figure out how to be more efficient and timely, we should try to be efficient and timely with this one, so. That's just my 2 cents on that one. Any other questions or comments before we let Mr. Martinez out of the hot seat? No, well, thank you, and thanks for your work on this.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Next up is communications with Chief of Staff. I see you made it from the wilds of I-25.
Good morning, Commissioners. Couple of exciting updates. We'll start with the RFP. We had a team of staff members cloistered for hours and hours and hours and hours on end, going over RFP responses, and they have made a initial tentative selection. So we are on track to have a contract awarded for the e-docket replacement program by the end of the year. So as soon as more information is publicly available, we will be sharing that, but we're very excited to be on track so far. So that's exciting. Other exciting news is we've been doing a lot of internal movement. There's been a lot of changes that HR and ASD and I have been working on, shuffling vacant positions, creating new positions, and I'm excited to start with our utilities division. So Gabriella has joined us as our Deputy Director of the Utilities Division. She started in that position on Monday. That kind of concludes a project that we've been working on in the agency to provide the utility-focused divisions with deputy directors. Part of Gabriella's job will be identifying areas and opportunities for training for our staff. So we're really excited about that. Also in that division, Jack Sidler and Eugene Evans have been selected to be the bureau chiefs of the Engineering and Telecommunications Bureau, respectively. And Jonah Maldine has been selected to be the bureau chief, replacing Gabriella in the Accounting Bureau. So congratulations to all of them. Also, congratulations is in order. We have selected Amanda Abeda, who you know from watching our front door and answering phones, to move into the HR division to help them out. That means our HR division is fully staffed, and that's very exciting. Like I said, there's a lot of internal movement. There will be more ready to talk about next week. But for now, I just want to say congratulations to all of those staff members who are trying new things, and we're excited to have them move into those positions. That does mean that more positions will be vacant as they, have moved out of those positions. So watch for those postings and hopefully filling those as soon as possible. I also want to say that as far as the recruitment front has gone, we've seen strong interest in positions across the agency. So whatever we're doing, word of mouth, postings, seems to be working. I was just reading that there's apparently an accountant shortage. That's what our state auditor has said. And thank you for everyone who's interested in New Mexico PRC, because we haven't seen that. So I'm a little afraid to say it out loud because I don't want to jinx it, but I am very excited that we've had such robust interest. The other thing that I would like to just say is you've seen a lot of communication from Jordan regarding our all hands meeting. There's more communications yet to come, but that is coming up on Monday. And probably one of the most exciting pieces of that will be the culmination, of the Great PRC Bake Off. You may have noticed today is Pie and Tart Day in the break room, so feel free to cast your ballot regarding those baked goods. But there will also be a final bake-off competition at the all hands meeting on Monday. So looking forward to that. And with those updates, I stand for questions.
Yeah, thank you for that update. And then just going back to how this meeting started, it is exciting that we're not in the mode where just we need to bring people on board, but people are starting to move around and looking forward to seeing them thrive in their new roles. So thanks for that update. And then I'm planning to enter on Monday, so competition will be stiff. Not trying to freeze the field or anything.
It's a good thing it's an anonymous entry.
Right.
So I shouldn't put a sign that says the chair's fruitcake.
Vote for me or else.
Right.
So anyway, thank you. Commissioners, did you have any other questions, comments?
Congratulations to all of the promotions and you know, movement across the agency. I think it's very beneficial for and I think healthy, right? I think sometimes it creates holes, but I think overall it's healthy work environment when people can use their experience, keep it in-house, and continue to build more experience. And sometimes also people need you know, just a change of environment. I know that that's something that has helped me in the past. You know, and I kind of moved around my old agency, but really enjoyed being able to serve the same mission from a different perspective. And so I'm really encouraged by that type of change. And I just think it's a really good thing. And yeah, so thank you for, you know, everybody's work. And also, again, congratulations to those who got their promotions.
I'll just reiterate that I appreciate all the good work in filling the open positions, and absolutely agree that you know, having folks apply internally and get these positions is a good thing. I also wanted to say congratulations on a excellent annual report that was released not long ago. So appreciate the work of Jordan and everyone involved in putting that together.
Thank you, Commissioner. It really was led by our project manager, Jordan Gutierrez, and all of the division.
Yeah, thank you. Next up and last on the agenda is communication with commissioners. Anybody want to start off on that? Seeing none, I'll just say that this week there was a WEC board meeting, and I participated in those as a member of the member advisory committee. There were two things that got presented, highlighted, discussed at that meeting that I think are of general interest. And one is WEC put out this thing they called the WARA, W-A-R-A, so it's another acronym. And it's just their regional assessment of load versus resources across the West. And it's just another piece of information along the theme of what we heard from Mr. Reddick Martinez, and what, you know, I was at the Northwest Energy Dialogues there also. And the electric industry finds itself in a situation that maybe is similar to what was going on in the 1950s, you know, where the US economy was changing itself and growing tremendously. So how we can, you know, we can do that, we can do that, how we can do that is kind of the theme of what we're hearing. And WEC's regional assessment is a very valuable report that also is just another on that list. And then the other thing that was highlighted, and this was a report that was prepared by NERC, but WEC had a significant contribution, was a interregional transfer study. So just looking across the United States for places where it might be valuable to have transmission links built to improve reliability, reduce cost nationwide. So that's an interesting look. I don't know that I'd ever seen a study where a group like NERC went bigger than just its region, so interesting there, they're highlighting a link from our part of the country to ERCOT that might be valuable. So anyway, that's another thing that was discussed, talked about at the WEC board meeting that I think folks that are interested in electricity might want to go and look at those. Then I agree, I was at that Northwest Electricity Dialogue and that was a good program. Again, just more on that same theme of the electric systems growing. So anyway, that was my update. Commissioners, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
A couple of things. I don't know that this is necessarily communications with commissioners and mostly just communicating, but just want to note that with respect to transmission and Order 1920, we do have a team following that and working on that in the background, including Darren Zigich from the Utility Division, Miguel Pettis and Meredith Tidwell and others. And so that will be at some point coming a lot faster. Just want to note that we're working on it and want to make sure that we're prepared there. And then the other thing, just in case it wasn't clear with all of the movement that is going on with promotions and changes in roles within the industry, there also are openings kind of everywhere, I think. And so just look out for any job announcements, and I'm sure you'll be seeing them on the website and social media and all that.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I was on this Washington Action Committee call of NARUC, and shockingly, they said that there would probably be no federal legislation by the end of the year on anything in that would impact the power sector. There was a discussion of Order 1920A, FERC Order 1920A, and I received some materials that I can forward if that's an interest on that topic. So I don't know who I should distribute those to, but I can certainly send those out. And also the gas committee call, interestingly enough, the gas committee call was about electric reliability. They had a couple of presenters from NERC that talked about some new standards impacting how utilities do their own reliability assessment. And so they're requiring them now to look at the effects of a fuel supply contingency. So if you don't have gas, or you don't have as much gas as you think. And so that's got to be something that's studied, an energy supply contingency, other stress conditions. Obviously, NERC has published their winter assessment for 2024, this winter, 2024, 2025. And also, they've got a long-term reliability assessment, and they're going to present on that at this gas committee call on January 13th. Don't ask me why we're talking about that at the gas committee, but we are.
Well, I mean, what I've been seeing on the NARUC cord collaboration is that just exactly what you were talking about with SPS's renewable plan is right now, electric generation requires gas. So putting as the system grows, you're not only growing the need for renewable energy, you're also growing the need for gas at the moment, so. That's an interesting question, so I think that's gonna be a big neighborhood thing through the whole year. Working on what that question means for folks like us. So glad to hear you're participating in that. Okay, so anything else before we start? Our highest duty today, which is judge the bake-off. So seeing no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you.